Dave from EdgyTools, and we're out here in the sand, and I'm going to show you a little demo for kind of the philosophy of the way metal moves. So here it goes. That simulates a hailstone hitting the metal, okay? And you've got the dent when the hailstone's gone, and you've got a pressure ring that's up and around the whole dent, okay? Most guys take their knockdown and they knock down 90% of the dent, okay? And that's how they would tackle the dent, and a lot of guys just feather it out in front and behind the dent to make that flat on the rail, whereas most of the pressure is going to be down below, which I'll show you later. But what you want to do is actually, instead of hitting straight down on the panel, you want to use your blending hammer on an angle, and I'm exaggerating this, to kind of knock the sand back down in the hole to flatten everything out without with moving that metal, so it takes the pressure off, much like popping a beer can dent out, which I'll show you in a little bit. And now I'm going to put a little dent in the rail here in my daughter's car so I can actually show you how that pressure release works in real life. And since I'm not the one fixing it, I'm going to put a doozy in there. So as you saw, I did most of a straight on dent versus the downward hail dent like I was talking about. If I had done it more of a downward glancing blow, even more of the pressure would be down here, but I was trying to keep that pressure 360 to show you on the demo of the knocking down. But again, there's a lot of pressure all the way around. So as we showed you in the knockdown video, there's a lot of different ways to strike, and the different pressures will move the metal differently. So there's a solid hit, and there's a bounce hit. Okay, and on rails and taking the pressure off, I really prefer the bounce hit because it really gets those molecules vibrating and the metal moving, and I'm really becoming a fan of this metal on metal knocking down and blending. So now going back up to the dent up top, and from this angle you should be able to see that pressure ring where it's really high on all the way around the dent. And again, even if you only see it above and below or in front or behind, you know from the way I struck that pressure ring is 360 degrees around that dent. So now Billy's actually going to start blending that dent down, just using the hammer. We're not going to do any glue pulling or anything else to the dent yet. He's just going to blend with it. I would have already had the dent gone, but Billy's still learning. He's using the original knocker known as the B cup on one side, and right now he's using the polished knob with an edgy extension on the other side. And you can see how he's just softening it up, not doing a whole lot of moving yet. That's a pretty severe dent. It probably doesn't look as bad on film, but I whacked that thing pretty good. You can't see the bottom yet. It's kind of like a Dent Olympic sized dent. So you can see he's dragging that metal, just like I showed you with the sand, towards the center of the dent from all directions. And he's not doing any hits hard enough that they leave divots or little pits or anything else that he's got to fix later. He's doing a really controlled, just manipulating the metal and really kind of warming it up and getting it moving. So you can see how the pressure ring's starting to come down. Starting to shrink it up. And now are you ready to glue pull? Yep. Okay, so the pressure's off the dents. We're going to glue a tab on, and we're going to explain what our tab selection and the amount of glue used and all the different options. And there's also a million different variables depending on what type of glue you're using, the temperature, the humidity outside, how long you let that glue set up. There's warm pulls and firm pulls and just a million different variations. I love to stick with the same glue, so I really get dialed in with it and know exactly to the millisecond how long to wait to get the pull that I'm looking for. And just like with knocking down and blending, there's different variations. So I'll have Billy show you the bump versus the bang and different pulls. So let's go ahead and glue a tab on there. So there he's used about a nickel-sized tab, or is that a quarter size tab? The second largest, the quarter size tab. Just enough glue to where it just about squeezes to the outside, but there's no overflow, is what he used. You could have also used a tiny tab with glue flowing over it to get a similar result, or you could have used the bigger size up with even less glue. The goal is to pull the center up and get it nice and flat with as little effort as possible. So he's going to probably, what are you going to do? A couple of bumps and then a bang? So you'll see the difference, how he kind of bumps that metal out. Just like with pushing a dent, you don't push it out in one shot. You kind of finesse it. So that's kind of what he's going to simulate here. And he's getting that bumps and he's feeling what the metal's doing. The glue's sticking really nice even in this heat. And he pulled that up in one. And as you can see, he already pulled it high with one shot. But you can see he's still got some pressure where it's high and low. So a little bit of a, not a volcano dent, but not flat by any means yet. So he's going to blend that outer edge even more and then flatten it all out. So let's watch as he does that. So first he's settling that high spot down where that tab pulled, and that's the weakest glue I can find. And it still pulled super high because there was no pressure left on that dent. He's also using a brand new hammer he just unwrapped, whereas you guys know with a knockdown and a blending hammer, you get used to exactly what that thing's doing. So he's using a brand new one and you can still see the amazing control. That's why Billy's known as the badass. So he's just, again, settling that center high right down. Now if he hadn't pulled it quite so high, he'd have less work going. But again, this is, you know, new tabs, new blending hammer and everything else, and so we're just showing you how this goes.
Three, two.
Dave Streen with EdgyTools here with Billy the Badass. So we're going over the edgy glue tabs, and I was explaining to Billy how they look similar to other tabs, but there's definitely some new technologies with the dimples and the plastics. It's kind of like reinventing a golf ball. There's only so many ways you can do it, but they all hit so differently. You're focusing on different things, and I'm focusing most on how the metal actually pulls out and flattens versus just yanking a hard yank. Because like I've been explaining, once you take that pressure off, you don't need that huge amount of force. I almost use it like a suction cup to just lift the last little bit out of the dent. So that's what we've been going over. And Billy, you've used these on a lot of hail cars recently. You want to talk about your experience at all?
Yeah, this tab right here, I don't know what size it is, but
I don't either, I should, but it's the smallest one, and it's smaller than a dime, and you would think, oh, that's not going to pull anything. And
yeah, it's not my go-to tab for, well, the damage we were fixing over in North Carolina.
Yeah.
But
so, and there were some real dents there too. It wasn't all gravy, but yeah, we let all the guys in the shop try them, and everybody's loving them and couldn't wait for them to come out. So I'm really excited to be releasing these finally. It's a funny story, but I was glue pulling a car with David Shalott, Big Dent Dave, up in Scottsdale, and I was doing the rails, and I had a discontinued product called the Tab Tote that I brought with me that had all my glue tabs. And it was an easy car. I was just glue pulling that rail and fixing all the dents and not really paying much attention. And I had all the name brands, Atlas and Kiko and everything on the tab toe, which is like a cart. And I'm noticing that these little green ones are pulling. I'm just loving how they're fixing the dents. And at the end of the rail, I didn't recognize them. So I started looking at them closer and I see just the faintest little alligator on the top. And I'm like, wait, what? And so I go back to my engineer and I'm digging through my emails and he's looking through his stuff and I'm like, he had no recollection of making these prototypes either. What happened was back at the end of 2016, we had made the prototypes and I tried them and didn't think anything of them. I gave them to a few other guys and they said, nah, Dave, you don't have anything here, they suck. Well, what happened is when the mold release, there's a release agent like an oil that makes the plastic pop out of the mold. Well, that release agent was still on the tabs when we were trying them. Well, sitting in the hot garage in Phoenix for a couple of years, that release agent evaporated off and now I was loving the tabs. And so I gave them to a couple other guys to try again and they loved them as well. So we got new prototypes made without the release agent and fell in love with them. So we're bringing them to market. So thanks for watching this tutorial. If you're new, we hope you learned a ton. If you're an expert already, we hope you picked up some tip or trick that'll help you down the road in the field. Some of the tools used was again the no-roll knockdown, which has pressure fit tips. It's polished stainless steel on each side, and then the pressure fit tips and caps just pop on. We also used the polished knob, which as you can see is super low profile.